This is my second video on education. I will go over the original law that created the Department of Education in 1979 and the proposed law to end it. So it started in 1979, October 17th, 1979. Jimmy Carter signed this into law. It's Public Law 96-88. Okay, so I'm just going to read the purposes of it. There's a whole lot to it. I'm just going to read the purposes. So, Section 102, the Congress declares that the establishment of a Department of Education is in the public interest, will promote the general welfare of the United States, will help ensure that education issues receive important treatment at the federal level, and will enable the federal government to coordinate its education activities more effectively. Therefore, the purposes of this act are: Number one, to strengthen the federal commitment to ensuring access to equal education opportunities for every individual. Number two, to supplement and complement the efforts of states, the local school systems, and other instrumentalities of the states, private sector, public and private education institutions, community-based nonprofit educational research institutions, community-based organizations, parents, and students to improve the quality of education. Number three, to encourage the increased involvement of the public, parents, and students in federal education programs. Number four, to promote improvements in the quality and usefulness of education through federally supported research, evaluation, and sharing of information. Number five, to improve the coordination of the federal education programs. Number six, to improve the management and efficiency of federal education activities, especially with respect to the process, procedures, and administrative structures of the dispersal of federal funds, as well as a reduction of unnecessary and duplicative burdens and constraints, including unnecessary paperwork on the recipients of federal funds. That's because there were several different departments one had to apply to for different money. Number seven, to increase the accountability of federal education programs to the President, the Congress, and the public. Section 103, it is the intention of the Congress in the establishment of the department to protect the rights of state and local government and public and private educational institutions in the areas of educational policies and administration of programs, and to strengthen and improve the control of such governments and institutions over their own educational programs and policies. The establishment of the Department of Education shall not increase the authority of the federal government over education or diminish the responsibility for education, which is reserved to the states and the local school systems and other instrumentalities of the states. And no provision of a program administered by the secretary or by any other officer of the department shall be construed to authorize the secretary or any such officer to exercise any direction, supervision, or control over the curriculum, program of instruction, administration, or personnel of any educational institution, school, or school system, over any accrediting agency or association, or over the selection or content of library resources, textbooks, or other instructional materials by any educational institution or school system, except to the extent authorized by law. C. The Secretary shall not, during the period within 8 months after the effective date of this act, take any action to withhold, suspend, or terminate funds under any program transferred by this act by reason failure of any state to comply with an applicable law requiring the administration of such a program through a single organizational unit. So, the federal government was never meant to take over anything. They don't provide curriculum. They don't tell schools what to do, except testing. H.R. 369, States Education Reclamation Act of 2025. It was introduced on January 13th by David Rouser, who's a Republican out of North Carolina. And it says to provide for the elimination of the Department of Education. The reasons David Rouser and Chuck Edwards, who also introduced the bill, say we need to eliminate the Department of Education are: the Constitution gives education to the state and local communities. The Federal Department of Education is inconsistent with the Constitution. The Federal Department of Education doesn't make policies for the most part. So the budget has ballooned from 14 billion to 73.5 billion in 41 years. It's actually 46, but who's counting? When comparing 14 billion, I did the math. When comparing 14 billion in 1979 to 73.5 billion in 2025, that's just over 5 times higher. However, if we look at inflation, 14 billion in 1979 is equal to 65 billion today. That leaves us with an 8.5 billion overage. Okay. That's for far less programs and funding of any kind. Now let's consider the college grants meant to help underprivileged kids to go to college. We're just considering those grants. The average cost of a year in a state university, a year in 1979 was $738. The average cost of a year at my local community college is over $25,000. That's an increase of over 34 times. Looking at it that way, 73.5 billion is actually pretty low. Education is suffering under managerial government. I would love for somebody to explain to me how that is. The Department of Education has fostered overregulation, standardization, bureaucratization, and litigation in United States education. Very true. Educators have been screaming about this for years. It's not a reason to get rid of the entire department, though. George W. Bush brought us No Child Left Behind. That lasted from 2002 to 2015, although it's not completely gone. It was supposed to help students in poverty, students of color, special education services, and English as a second language students. They held schools accountable for how kids learn and achieve. The problem is they did it through testing. The testing has been so bad that it overrode everything else he tried to do. Teachers aren't able to really get deep into their subjects because they have to teach kids how to take a test. The testing is an albatross and is a massive financial waste. Get rid of the testing. Some bad policies are not a reason to throw out the whole department, though. While the average national salary of public school teachers is $61,730, the average salary for the Department of Education employee is $112,724, just about double. That's absolutely unacceptable. So let's take some of the testing money or all the testing money and pay our teachers better. Our education is failing. That's part of the bill. Our education is failing. So we rank 38th in math and 24th in science in the world. We all know this. That still isn't a reason to get rid of funding for special needs kids, low-income school districts, or post-secondary education. Top-down uniformity is detrimental. This makes the executive order ending radical indoctrination in K-12 schooling that I discussed in a previous post pretty confusing because it was quite a lot of top-down uniformity. Each state has different needs. I think we all can agree with that. There are some things that should be uniform, so the high school diploma in North Carolina will be accepted in Oregon and vice versa. The Department of Education is hostile to parents, teachers, and local communities who wish to make changes. I would love to hear some of these stories since the curriculum is crafted by the state and local school boards, not the federal government. Standardization that doesn't consider the individual needs of a diverse population. Apparently, they've never heard of IEPs, 504s, and college credit programs. Those didn't start with this POTUS. They addressed the needs of many different kids. POTUS started trying to shut down the Department of Education last time he was in office. The school choice program isn't what people think it is. So I decided to do some research several years back because at the time I couldn't imagine why anybody would be against school choice. I would say luckily, but it's not luck. It is something I grew into, that my mind is elastic enough to change once I'm presented with new information. I came to realize that after several books on the subject that school choice is exactly what it says. The schools choose who gets educated. With testing, jobs on the line, and funding on the line, the schools will only accept the brightest kids or the kids who test well. I actually had a MAGA tell me we shouldn't waste money educating kids from low income communities because they obviously were never going to be the best and the brightest. Sounds a lot like the reasons we didn't educate girls or slaves back in the day. So they say the Department of Education will be broken apart and given piece by piece to the Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, Department of the Interior, the Department of Defense, and the Department of the Treasury. If you remember, Jimmy Carter started the Department of Education to bring education into one department rather than having it spread across other departments. That is going to make things very confusing and duplicative. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these bills. So please subscribe, like, share so we can let as many people as possible know how their representatives are representing them. Have a great day. Thank you.